Millionaire sees a homeless mom in the rain. What he does next will shock you. Rain poured down on Buenos Aires, turning the bustling streets into a sea of umbrellas and reflections on the drenched cobblestones. Raindrops hit Luciano Moretti's windshield like tiny explosions, but he barely noticed the storm. His mind was focused, reviewing every detail of his upcoming business presentation. As the CEO of one of Argentina's largest financial corporations, his every move was timed to perfection. Emotions were a luxury reserved for moments outside the corporate world, where pragmatism reigned supreme. Yet something was about to disrupt his relentless rhythm. Stopped at a traffic light in the heart of Palermo, Luciano spotted a figure that didn't blend with the cityscape. On the corner of the sidewalk, a young woman huddled under the heavy rain, trying to shield a baby in her arms. She wore an old, soaked coat, her thin, trembling arms wrapped around the little one with desperate tenderness. Luciano watched her in his rearview mirror, feeling something stir within him. A distant, unsettling sensation he wasn't used to letting in. The young woman held a small cardboard sign with uneven letters that read, "Por favor, ayúdenos. Necesitamos comida y refugio." Please help. We need food and shelter. For a brief moment, Luciano remembered his own childhood, marked by scarcity and cold streets before he built his empire. But he quickly pushed the thought aside, focusing on the traffic light that was about to turn green. However, just before the car moved, Luciano felt an irresistible surge of empathy, something he'd learned to control over the years. He lowered the car window, momentarily speechless. The young woman hesitated, approaching cautiously. Luciano noticed she could barely hold the baby. The rain intensified, heavy drops running down her face, blending with silent tears. "Get in," he said, his voice firm but gentle. She hesitated, clearly suspicious, but the need to protect her baby won out. She settled into the back seat, carefully holding her child as Luciano quickly pulled away from the curb. Luciano adjusted the car heater, feeling the chill. He noticed how her body trembled despite her attempts to hide it. Their eyes met briefly in the rearview mirror, and he saw deep exhaustion in her features. Yet despite her hardships, there was a certain dignity about her, a resilient pride that kept her from asking for more than necessary. "What's your name?" he asked, softening his tone to avoid startling her. "Isabella," she replied faintly. "But everyone calls me Isa, and this is Sophia," she added, glancing at her daughter with a faint but protective smile. Luciano nodded, not asking more. The silence between them was almost comfortable, despite the unusual situation. The grandeur of the car, the warmth now filling it, and the momentary safety offered by that unexpected act of kindness felt surreal to Isa. Minutes later, the car parked in front of Luciano's vast mansion in Recoleta, a modern building with sleek glass windows and a sprawling, well-kept garden. Isa looked at the house wide-eyed, unable to believe what she was seeing. She stayed silent, not knowing what to expect. Luciano exited the car, moving to open the back door and help her out. "You can stay here until I get back," he said, handing her a silver key. Isa held the key with trembling hands, almost unable to believe what had just happened. She was used to looks of contempt and rejection, never expecting anyone to be capable of such a sudden act of compassion, especially from a man like Luciano, whose appearance and demeanor suggested someone cold and detached from the struggles of the streets. "Senor, I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion and accumulated exhaustion. "No need to thank me," he replied, avoiding eye contact, slightly uncomfortable with this rare show of humanity. "Just take care of her, and yourself. I'll be back tomorrow." Without waiting for more explanations, Luciano turned and walked back to his car, not looking back. He knew he had a flight to catch and a meeting that could determine the future of his company. But as he drove toward the airport, an unsettling feeling continued to haunt him. He knew Issa wasn't just another homeless person he had helped. Something about her touched him deeply, though he was reluctant to admit why. Holding Sophia close, Issa slowly walked through the spacious living room of Luciano's mansion. Sophisticated furniture, art pieces, and a crystal chandelier made everything seem like a mirage to her. This was an unexpected and almost miraculous refuge, a place where she could finally rest, if only for one night. As the night went on, Issa found a comfortable room where she could lay Sophia down on a soft bed, something she'd never been able to offer her daughter. Sophia's eyes sparkled upon seeing the luxurious room, and Issa couldn't hold back an emotional smile. For a few moments she felt genuine happiness, seeing her daughter in a safe environment, even if she didn't know what the future held. That night, while the storm continued raging outside, Issa allowed herself a moment of relief. Luciano's house was an improbable shelter, but for now, it was all she had, and all she needed. Closing the door behind her, Issa felt years of torment and uncertainty lift from her shoulders, as if she'd left them outside the pristine walls. The luxurious furniture and the tall windows overlooking the dark, rain-lit garden made this place a surreal haven. In silence, as if afraid to wake from a dream, Issa let her gaze wander around the wide room, almost unable to believe what she was seeing. In her arms, Sophia slept, unaware of where she was, but nestled in her mother's arms, as if, for the first time, she felt safe. Issa knew this chance, as improbable as it was a small miracle. For someone like her, who lived without a permanent address or stable shelter, knowing she could sleep without worry was an unthinkable luxury. Looking around, Issa noticed an open kitchen, fully equipped with gleaming appliances. Feeling a pang of hesitation, she approached, but hunger overpowered any reservations. Since she'd lost her home, the chances for a decent meal were rare, and cooking with fresh ingredients even rarer. Without thinking too much, she gently laid Sophia down on one of the sofas, making sure she was still deeply asleep, and walked to the kitchen. The cabinets around her were impeccably organized, revealing shelves filled with food she hadn't seen in a long time. She opened the refrigerator drawer with eager fingers, finding fruits, vegetables, and dairy products, all fresh and inviting under the white light. She took out some eggs, a few vegetables, and a slice of homemade bread, feeling a simple joy as she began to prepare a meal. As she stirred the eggs in the skillet, Issa couldn't contain the swelling emotion in her chest. Cooking for most was routine, but for her it meant stability, security, and above all, a sense of control that had long been missing. When the soft scent of the cooked eggs began to fill the kitchen, a quiet smile appeared on her face. It was a familiar yet long-forgotten feeling. She cut small pieces for Sophia, imagining her daughter's reaction to a meal prepared with love and care. After dinner, Issa turned to Sophia, who was playing with a spoon as if it were the most precious of toys. Issa watched her with a serene gaze, savoring the instant of peace. She got up and wandered around the house, looking for a place where she could give Sophia a warm bath, and maybe take one herself. Entering the master bathroom, Issa stopped, astonished by the space's grandeur. White marble walls, heated floors, and a bathtub large enough for two gleamed under the soft lights. It was a place she never thought she'd be, a symbol of a world she didn't belong to. But there, facing the chance to provide a bit of comfort for her daughter, Issa took a deep breath and decided that, at least for one night, she'd enjoy this comfort. She filled the tub with warm water and carefully undressed Sophia, gently lowering her into the water. Watching her daughter's face light up with surprise at the soothing warmth, Issa felt a lump form in her throat. Sophia laughed and splashed, her laughter echoing around the bathroom, transforming the space into a bubble of genuine happiness. Issa washed her daughter's little fingers, her face, and wrapped her in a soft robe she found in the closet. After taking care of Sophia, Issa finally took a bath herself. The warm water washed over her skin, carrying away the traces of time and the painful memories of nights spent in the cold. Closing her eyes, she was transported to a time when she still had a home and a bright future. But life, with its unpredictable turns, had pushed her far from that path, teaching her that destiny wasn't always fair. As the first rays of sunlight began to light up the room, Issa slowly woke up, still caught between sleep and reality. The room remained silent except for the soft sound of Sophia's breathing beside her. She looked at her daughter's serene face and allowed herself a smile. That night had been more than just rest. It was proof that hope still existed in her life. Issa got up, breathing deeply, determined to do whatever it took to keep that peace in her life and her daughter's. When the first rays of sun entered the room, Issa's eyes opened slowly, and the reality around her began to solidify. The soft bed she had rested on, the blanket that warmed her, and Sophia's serene face beside her reminded her that even if just for a moment, she had found a safe haven. But as her gaze wandered around the elegant surroundings, her thoughts began to drift back, and painfully, her past returned like a turbulent river of memories. Issa never imagined she would one day be homeless. Years before, she had been a young woman, full of dreams and strength. Her dreams had seemed so close, almost tangible. She had worked hard to get accepted into one of Buenos Aires' top medical schools, overcoming challenges and fighting tirelessly to become the first in her family to earn a college degree. She was recognized among her professors as a talented student with a passion for medicine that showed in her dedication to her studies and her sincere desire to help others. Her mother used to say that, even as a child, Issa was always caring for small animals in the neighborhood, always kind, always trying to ease any suffering. Everything seemed to be in place until the day she lost her parents in a tragic accident. Issa remembered the late-night phone call, the hollow feeling upon hearing the news, and the despair of realizing that the life she knew was ending. The world she had known crumbled in seconds. With her parents' deaths, she lost not only her family, but also the emotional support that kept her grounded. The grief consumed her, and the pain, once internal and silent, turned into a weight that affected her every action, draining her spirit. Along with her parents, Issa also lost the financial support that allowed her to study without worrying about expenses. Bills began piling up, and the exhausting pace of medical school, combined with the job she'd taken to try to support herself, began to take a toll on her performance. She spent sleepless nights, torn between academic obligations and rising hardships, and it became clear her energy was dwindling. It was during this time of vulnerability that she met Gabriel, a charming and seemingly understanding man. Gabriel was gentle and engaging and seemed able to read her soul. He became a friend during difficult days, someone who made her believe she could overcome that phase and that, perhaps, it was still possible to smile sincerely. Issa entered the relationship, finding in Gabriel what she thought was support and eternal love. She trusted him completely, allowing him into every detail of her life, sharing her fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities. But over time, Gabriel revealed a side she never could have imagined. The sweet and caring man became possessive and aggressive. Issa, who once found security in him, now felt trapped in a web of control and manipulation. The once affectionate gestures turned into cruel words and demands, and she realized too late that she had handed him control of her life. Quietly, Gabriel started emptying the account she'd kept for emergencies. Secretly, he diverted small amounts, but by the time Issa noticed, it was too late. All her remaining savings had disappeared. One evening, as Issa tried to confront Gabriel, he showed her the full extent of his selfishness and coldness. With harsh, indifferent words, he laughed at her illusions, dismissing the feelings he once claimed to value. He said he'd never wanted anything but her money, enjoying watching her depend on him emotionally. Then, as if she were nothing, he left her, and without a trace of guilt. That night, Issa was left alone, penniless and carrying in her womb the child she hadn't even had a chance to plan for. Without financial or emotional support, and with the burden of pregnancy, Issa found herself unable to continue her studies. She tried to find work, tried to start over somehow, but with every attempt, she faced people's contempt and the harsh reality of not being able to support herself. Buenos Aires, once the backdrop of her dreams, had now become a battleground where each day was a struggle for survival. As she caressed Sophia's face, her tear-filled eyes reflected the pain and strength that had kept her going. Her daughter was her only treasure. For her, Issa endured cold nights, extreme exhaustion, and constant insecurity. Every night spent on the streets, every threat she faced, was a burden she bore silently, for Sophia's sake. Issa never let despair dim her eyes when she looked at her daughter. She always tried to smile, hiding the tears and the growing fear inside her. It was her silent promise. Her daughter wouldn't bear the weight of her suffering. When Luciano returns, he's shocked to find that Issa has transformed his cold, empty mansion into a place filled with warmth and life. But her presence also forces him to confront his past and the walls he's built around his heart. Issa knew she had to turn gratitude into action. She knew Luciano might never understand the depth of her thankfulness, but she promised herself that she would do everything possible to show him that his gesture had been more than just help. He had given her a night of peace, and that peace gave her the strength to keep fighting. Luciano returned to the mansion earlier than expected. His meeting had been postponed at the last minute. Entering his home, he sensed an unusual warmth. He stopped in the hallway and heard what sounded like a soft laugh. To his surprise, he realized it was a baby's laughter. Curious, he followed the sound to the guest room corridor, where the slightly open door revealed a scene he'd never expected to see in his own house. The room, bathed in afternoon light, was filled with a warm and peaceful atmosphere. Issa, kneeling on the floor, was playing with Sophia, making a stuffed bear dance from side to side. The little one tried to grab the toy, laughing each time Issa moved it just out of reach. Issa's expression radiated genuine affection and joy, something Luciano recognized as rare in his own life. He stood there for a few seconds, silently observing, completely captivated by the simplicity and happiness that emanated from the two of them. Issa and Sophia's presence seemed to have transformed the house, filling it with a warmth Luciano had never experienced before. Without realizing it, a gentle smile appeared on his face, and he felt something missing in his life, a sense of coziness and humanity he'd never imagined wanting. Suddenly, Issa sensed his presence and turned around, slightly surprised and embarrassed. She quickly put the bear down and held Sophia, who was still smiling, unaware of Luciano's presence. For a moment, Issa seemed to hesitate, as if afraid of reproach for being so at ease. "No need to stop on my account," Luciano said gently, his voice surprisingly soft, almost encouraging. Issa relaxed slightly, but her eyes showed a mixture of surprise and gratitude that Luciano couldn't ignore. He realized how much that simple offer of shelter meant to her. There was deep sincerity in her expression, and he could see that the safety and comfort of his house meant more to her than he'd imagined. I didn't know you'd be back so soon, Isa said, her voice slightly trembling but filled with dignity. Luciano took a few steps closer, looking at Sophia with curiosity. The child looked at him with innocent eyes, reaching out her little hand. On impulse, he extended his finger for her to hold. Sophia's touch was soft, and she grasped Luciano's finger happily, making him smile in a way he hadn't expected. The simple gesture seemed to contain a sweetness and simplicity that touched him deeply and unexpectedly. "She's amazing," Luciano murmured, looking at Isa, who now smiled with pride and emotion. "Yes, she is," Isa replied, her eyes shining with a feeling that went beyond words. Holding Sophia closer, she continued in a whisper, "And I don't know how to thank you. Having a safe night, a roof after so long, it was like a dream." Luciano felt the impact of Isa's words and realized how much that night had meant to her. Each of her words made him feel a growing sense of responsibility, something he couldn't ignore. Isa wasn't just a stranger he'd helped. She and Sophia had filled an invisible void in his life. The simple singing, with laughter and genuine smiles, brought a new energy to the house and, inexplicably, to his heart. "Isa," Luciano said, his voice lower but full of sincerity, "there's no need to thank me. Actually, I think I need this as much as you do." Isa looked at him, surprised and moved by the unexpected confession. It was unimaginable to her that a man like Luciano, so powerful and resourceful, would admit to needing something, let alone her and her daughter. But there before her he seemed more human, even vulnerable, as if that admission were a surrender to his own emotions. And suddenly, Isa realized he also carried a silent loneliness. As Luciano and Isa shared this quiet moment, the mansion's front door swung open with a sharp click. Valentina Rossi, Luciano's ex-lover and business rival, strode in unannounced. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked through the main living room, admiring the mansion's familiar luxury. In a few steps, she found Luciano, who was standing in the corridor outside the guest room. "Luciano," Valentina said with a confident smile and direct gaze, "I thought I'd surprise you." Luciano's expression shifted from warmth to guarded neutrality. "Valentina, what are you doing here?" Valentina's eyes flicked toward Isa and Sophia, her smile faltering for a moment. "Who's this?" she asked, her tone sharp and curious. "I missed you, so I decided to drop by unannounced," Valentina said, her tone dripping with confidence. Luciano smiled politely, but his gaze drifted toward the hallway almost distractedly. Valentina quickly noticed his subtle shift. She knew Luciano as a man dedicated to business, practical and careful in his personal relationships, always aware of keeping his private life under control. However, there was something new and undefined in his expression, something Valentina couldn't decipher. As they talked, Valentina noticed a different presence in the mansion. From afar, she heard a soft, childlike sound from upstairs. She frowned, trying to understand what it meant. Wasting no time, Valentina interrupted the conversation and walked purposefully toward the sound. Luciano hesitated for a moment, but decided not to stop her. Part of him knew Valentina would eventually discover Isa and Sophia's presence, and he no longer felt the need to hide. Turning the corner, Valentina found Isa holding Sophia in her arms. The initial shock on her face quickly turned to distrust and resentment. She looked Isa up and down, scrutinizing every detail, from her simple clothes to the protective way she held her daughter. Sophia looked at the stranger with curious eyes, but Isa immediately sensed the veiled hostility in Valentina's gaze. "And who might you be?" Valentina asked with a mocking, venomous smile. Isa hesitated, but answered calmly and politely, trying to ignore the growing discomfort she felt in the face of this intimidating woman. "I'm Isa, and this is my daughter, Sophia." Valentina stifled a sarcastic laugh, examining Isa with a look that dripped disdain and judgment. She figured Luciano must be offering shelter to this woman, and couldn't avoid the jealousy that began to spread in her chest. It was impossible for Valentina to accept that Luciano could care about someone who, in her eyes, was just a worthless stranger. After a tense moment, Valentina turned and went back to the study where Luciano was waiting. Her expression was now completely different, full of distrust and jealousy. "So, the young lady I found upstairs," she began, mixing irony with accusation. "Is she your latest guest?" Luciano remained calm, but couldn't deny the discomfort Valentina's insistence caused. He knew explaining Isa's presence to this jealous woman would be difficult, and Valentina's assessing look made it clear she assumed the worst. "Isa and her daughter are going through tough times. I offered to help," he replied, trying to keep a neutral tone. But Valentina was already consumed with jealousy. She narrowed her eyes, her thoughts churning. She couldn't accept that Luciano, always so reserved and calculating, had opened his mansion's doors to a stranger. "Don't you think it's risky, Luciano? Letting someone you barely know stay here? She could be trying to take advantage of your kindness," Valentina insinuated, her voice loaded with suggestion. Luciano stayed silent for a moment, but Valentina's seed of doubt began to bother him. He knew Isa was honest, but security and appearances had always been crucial in his life, and Valentina's sharp words made him question if he was being impulsive. Seeing the doubt her insinuation had planted, Valentina continued to press. "Look at her, Luciano, a stranger with a child. An easy situation to manipulate to get what she wants. How do you know she's trustworthy?" Luciano felt the weight of Valentina's words. While part of him resisted the idea of doubting Isa, another part couldn't ignore the implications. He decided he needed to clarify the situation, and, with a sigh, went up to the room where Isa was with Sophia. Seeing him enter with a tense expression, Isa felt a chill down her spine. Something had changed in Luciano's demeanor, and her heart raced, realizing he might be doubting her. He approached, looking at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before, disorienting her. "Isa, I need to understand a bit more about your story. Is there something you need to tell me?" Isa was caught off guard, feeling immediately cornered. The words Luciano used sounded like judgment, a silent accusation that struck her deeply. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to respond. But his inquisitive gaze and the memory of Valentina's disdainful face made her feel humiliated. I've already told you what's important," she said, her voice trembling and her heart heavy. "I never wanted to take advantage of anything." Luciano observed every detail of Isa's reaction, and part of him still resisted believing she could be dishonest. But Valentina had planted doubt, and he couldn't shake it. Isa saw the conflict on Luciano's face, and for the first time felt that perhaps this refuge, which meant so much to her and her daughter, was just a fleeting illusion. She knew she had no way to prove her honesty, and seeing Luciano's doubt was a sharp pain that struck her pride. Feeling humiliated and desolate, she held Sophia and, without a word, decided she wouldn't stay where she wasn't truly accepted. "I think I understand," she said, her voice firm but hiding deep pain. "Thank you for the help, Luciano, but Sophia and I have stayed long enough." Holding Sophia in her arms, she left the room without looking back. The sense of loss only grew, and Luciano wondered how he could have doubted Isa's integrity. When he finally received the private investigator's report, he opened it quickly, his anguish and need for redemption battling within him. As he read, Issa's story unfolded with a depth he had never imagined. She had been a dedicated student with a promising career until the tragedy of losing her parents. Her path had been marked by pain and abandonment, by an abusive relationship in which she had placed her trust. Then came the solitary struggle to protect Sophia amid poverty and despair. Every line of the investigation revealed the strength of a woman who, despite all odds, had endured with her dignity intact. Luciano felt devastated. Issa had never been a schemer, had never wanted anything from him but a temporary shelter, and he had betrayed her by believing Valentina's cold words. Regret hit him like a blow, and he realized he had been selfish and unfair. The pride that had always guided him melted away, leaving behind a bitterness hard to bear. He knew that by doubting Issa he had lost something more precious than any material possession. As he continued reading, a painful clarity emerged. Valentina had never been, and never would be, the woman he truly needed by his side. Her coldness and cruelty in manipulating situations to maintain control and influence disgusted him. The love he thought he felt for Valentina now seemed like an illusion, supported by interests and appearances. Realizing this, he felt an urgent need to find Issa and Sophia, to offer them a sincere apology, but also something more. He wanted Issa to know that her kindness had transformed him, that the warmth and sincerity she had brought into his life were now indispensable to him. He was determined to find them. Luciano asked the investigator to locate Issa, knowing he needed the chance to redeem himself. That night he couldn't sleep, his heart racing at the thought that if he didn't act soon, he might forever lose the chance to make amends with her. In his mind, he revisited every moment they had shared, every smile, every gesture of affection Issa had shown for Sophia. He remembered her words of thanks, the way she looked at him with respect and gratitude. These memories drove him to fight for her forgiveness. Finally, the next day, Luciano received Issa's location. Learning where she was brought him a wave of relief, but also a new fear. He didn't know how she would react to seeing him again, and had no idea if she would accept his apology or wish him gone. But one thing was clear. He was willing to do whatever it took for her to understand the sincerity of his regret and his need to have them back in his life. Leaving for the address where Issa was staying, Luciano felt a mix of anxiety and hope in his heart. He knew that finding her meant more than just correcting a mistake. It was the chance to open the door to a new life, one he had never planned but now felt was what he truly needed. Reaching the address, Luciano took a deep breath, facing the weight of the decisions that had led him here. He was prepared to hear her rejection, to accept that she might never want to see him again. But he also knew he couldn't let fear stop him. He knocked on the door, and within seconds it opened. Issa appeared, surprised, with visible caution in her gaze. For a moment, Luciano felt small before her, but with a deep sigh he began. "Issa, please," he said almost in a whisper, trying to contain the emotion in his voice. "I know I'm probably the last person you wanted to see, but please give me a chance. I made a terrible mistake. I let doubts and insecurities cloud my judgment, and I was unfair." He took a deep breath, watching her face. "Since you and Sophia left, I realized how much you both mean to me. The house, my life, it felt empty without you." Issa listened, and Luciano saw an internal struggle in her eyes. She didn't respond immediately, but he felt his words were reaching her. Though she was silent, something in the way she looked at him encouraged him to continue. "Issa, you gave me a new perspective, showed me what truly matters. I want you to know I'm not just here to apologize. I'm here to ask you to come back home with me. I want to give you and Sophia the home you deserve, a home where you can be happy and safe. I want you to stay, not as guests, but as part of my life, as part of our lives." Issa took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. For so long she had been looking for a refuge, a place where she could finally feel at peace. Luciano's proposal was tempting, but her heart still bore the scars of abandonment and distrust. She looked away, her gaze falling on Sophia, who was playing near the door. She began to recall everything she'd endured to get here. All the pain, the lonely nights on the streets, the cold, but also the brief moments of hope. Now, facing Luciano, she felt that life was offering her a second chance. His words, so sincere and filled with regret, touched her deeply. She looked at Sophia, realizing that maybe this was the opportunity to give her daughter something she'd never had, a true family, a place where love and security could flourish. Turning her gaze back to Luciano, Issa saw honesty in his eyes, and something within her calmed. She knew that forgiving him and accepting his invitation was more than an emotional decision. It was the chance at a new life, a fresh start she had never thought possible. Sophia, sensing the emotion in the air, approached Luciano, looking at him with childish curiosity. In a sweet and spontaneous gesture, she reached out her arms to him. "Tio Luciano, are you coming with us?" Sophia asked, her soft voice filled with expectation. Her hopeful gaze made Luciano's heart race. Kneeling down to her level, he opened his arms and hugged her, whispering, "Yes, my little one. I'll come with you forever." Seeing Sophia's gesture, Issa felt a knot unravel in her heart. It was as if her daughter's innocence was giving her permission to start again, to open her heart once more. She smiled silently, and when Luciano looked up, he found her gaze full of tenderness and silent understanding. "I accept, Luciano," Issa said, her voice heavy with emotion. "But with one condition, that what we build is real, without fears or distrust." He nodded, tears discreetly in his eyes. "I promise, Issa. I swear we'll build together, and nothing and no one will take that away from us." As they finally returned to the mansion together, the cold, formal environment seemed transformed. Sophia's laughter filled every corner, and Issa's gaze, now bright and serene, was the true reflection of the peace and happiness Luciano had been seeking. Valentina, upon hearing of their reconciliation, felt the bitter reality of her defeat. She hadn't just lost Luciano to another woman, but to a family he had chosen to build with sincerity and love. Defeated and humiliated, Valentina left, knowing she would never hold the place in his heart she once thought she owned. Over time, Luciano offered Issa a position in his company, where she could dedicate herself and grow professionally, knowing he would support her at every step. Together, they gradually built a genuine life where trust and respect were the foundation. For Sophia, Luciano became more than just a constant presence. He became the father figure she so desperately needed. In his care for the little one, he found the purpose he had been seeking. One sunny day, while they were playing in the garden, Sophia called him Papa for the first time. Luciano felt it was the greatest title he had ever received. Every day was a step toward a new life, a life where everyone had the chance to be happy, to feel complete and secure. Luciano, Issa, and Sophia finally formed the family they all needed, a family where love and hope blossomed anew each morning. And so, surrounded by the joy and warmth of a life full of purpose and love, Luciano, Issa, and Sophia went on together, building a future filled with hope, where the past was just a distant memory, and the present a promise they renewed every day. Did you enjoy this heartwarming story full of twists and emotions? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Let us know what you thought of this emotional ending. See you in the next story.